Welcome to English 4E. This is the grade 12 English Workplace, Term 1B, Class 10, Assignments 15 and 16. We're going to be looking at semicolons, colons, and just generally writing today. I'm Jillian Percy, and here are the ways you can contact us. If you want to talk to me while I'm on the air, 1-800-465-7144. If you want to talk to me while I'm in the office, 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. You can fax us work, 1-800-463-7852. Obviously, right now with the postal strike, please do not mail us anything. Email jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca or jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. That is the one people use if they are planning to try and share a document with me. That one works really well for that. My Facebook is capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. Now, if you put in a friend request to me, for some reason, it's not always showing up. But if you send me a message, that will always show up to me. So if you want to talk to me on Facebook, send a friend request, but also send me a message. And that way it usually shows up in my email and I see it. I do try and check that at least once a day, but it is not the most prompt way to reach me. If you want an answer almost instantly, the best way is send me an email, because I check that constantly throughout the day. There are two different YouTube channels you can use. One is the teacher channel that I have. That is the same address as Facebook, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. That has all the courses I taught last year and the courses I've taught this year. So if you're taking a course that I haven't come to yet, that can be really helpful. The other YouTube channel that you can check out is the WASA Distance Education Center. That is only this year, but it has all the different teachers that are teaching this year, their courses. So if you're taking multiple courses from us this year, that is a nice one-stop shop to check out everybody's work. So how to hand in work. I always say this every week because sometimes there's issues. The biggest thing is whenever you hand in work, if you can, please send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. That is way better than just sending it to me, okay? You can CC me in the email if you want to be doubly safe. That way for sure I see it. That's jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. However, when you send it to student work, the secretary can log in our front logbook that you submitted the work. That would something happened, I was sick, or I went away. We have a record that it came in. If you only send it to me, I don't keep a logbook. The other thing is sometimes people take more than a year to finish a course. And if that happens, you can always go back and we can find previous work that might have been submitted to another teacher, right? I have gone back and found work from 2019. That was like 2 or 3 teachers ago, but we've still been able to find it and use it for assignments. So that is the other reason why it's really helpful to send it to student work rather than just to send it to me. Whenever you send an assignment, please include your full name, first and last, the course name, the assignment number, and the name if it's got a name. If an assignment asks for both a rough and a good draft, please label which one is which and include them both in the same email. And the reason for that is normally I look for differences between the two. I'm looking for revisions, I'm looking for editing. The other big thing is sometimes they're marked are completely different. The rough copy might be worth 10 marks. The good copy might be worth 20 marks. If I don't know which one it is, I kind of don't know what to do with the marks. So that's a big thing too. Now, some people are taking photographs of your assignment. That's totally fine, especially if you're handing it in to me on Facebook. But when you do that, make sure, take a good look at it. Make sure it's nice and clear and crisp so that I can read your writing, okay? If it's blurry, I won't be able to read it. Once you've taken the picture, if you're sending it to me on Facebook, that's fine. I can always click on it and download it. I'm okay with that. But if you are sending it through your phone, I'm asking that you please download it first to the phone or your computer if you're doing a computer, save it, and then send it to me as an attachment in an email. If you just share it with me, like as an email, I know there's a way to do that. And it's kind of the quicker way. But when you do that, it shows up kind of strange on the computer. It's meant to show up properly on a phone. It doesn't show up properly because I'm not on a phone, I'm on a computer. So if you can save it and send it as an attachment, it works so much better. So I request that if you are doing it through email, please try that. Okay, our plan for the week, we've done Monday, Tuesday. Today we are hoping to get through K15 and K16. And I think we should be okay to get through that today. Today we are working on understanding the purposes of using a colon in your writing, identify when colons are being used correctly or incorrectly, create sentences that use colons correctly, understand the purposes of using a semicolon in your writing, identify when semicolons are being used correctly or incorrectly, create sentences that use semicolons correctly, remember and utilize correct paragraph format, demonstrate your understanding of grammar concepts and parts of speech, and create paragraphs that use semicolons correctly within them. So we are now on activity number 5, which has several assignments. The first one is assignment number 15. Okay, so this little part is sort of the preamble that is normally in your unit. Again, I didn't write this. I was kind of handed it. I have made some changes, but I haven't revised it as much as I would. So sometimes this is very short and brief. So I go over it just kind of so you know where we are, but then I usually expand on it because if you weren't super comfortable with a lot of grammar and vocabulary, this might be not enough information is what I think. So this is all about semicolons. A semicolon is just another form of punctuation that can be used in a sentence. It can join two main clauses in a compound sentence and can take the place of the following conjunctions: and, but, however, for, oh, or, so, and yet. I wouldn't put it quite that way, I'll be honest with you. Okay. On Tuesday, Lori and her friends will be rehearsing their play and setting up the stage for presentation. It will be an important day. So those are two sentences and they've combined them using a semicolon. Patrick has been practicing for his literacy test. Semicolon, it is scheduled for next Thursday. Now, the actual question, I'm going to give you the question first and then I teach it because I find then you kind of know why I'm teaching what I'm teaching. Write 5 sentences of your own to show that you understand the semicolon. Hint, try to include some of the different ways it can be used. Now, this is just kind of the one way, but we're going to talk more about the other ways. The marking scheme for this, it's only worth 5 marks because you're really only writing 5 sentences. And basically it's 1 mark for each sentence that's correctly using a semicolon. If you don't use it correctly, I don't give you the mark, okay? Just so you're aware. All right, here's a little comic or meme I found on semicolons. And the colon says to the semicolon, "Why are you crying?" And the semicolon is crying and says, "Nobody understands me." So don't worry if you're not sure how to use them. They are a source of confusion in general, or we would not have a comic about it. So when and how do we use semicolons in a sentence? Basically, there are 3 general uses. I'm going to kind of talk about them briefly and then I'll go into detail. So first, as sort of a super comma, if there's a series of items in a list that already has commas within them, then a semicolon gets used to make the separations between them. Number 2, you can join 2 sentences that have an important connection between them that you're trying to emphasize. And then number 3, you can join 2 sentences together when you are using a conjunctive adverb. Now let me go in and explain each of these in more detail. So first of all, as a type of super comma, this is probably the most common way you'll see it used. Hopefully you recall that we use commas to separate items that are in a list. For example, if I said, "I want you to buy flour, milk, bread, eggs, and steak at the store," I put a comma between each one of those nouns because it helps make it clear to the reader that it is a list of different items rather than some strange entity known as flour, milk, bread, eggs, right? That doesn't make very much sense. So that's why there's a comma between them. So sometimes a list, which we also sometimes call a series of items, might need to use commas to separate things such as separating the day and the month in a date, or separating the city and the province in a location. So for a date, You might have Wednesday, comma, November, comma, 2024. Or if you were talking about a location, you might say Dryden, comma, Ontario. When that happens, sometimes in a sentence, you might need to list a series of dates or a series of locations. And when you're putting a comma between each item, like each date or each location, it's going to get confusing. It's not going to be helpful. And that is where we use semicolons as a type of super comma. So for example, if I'm talking about a concert tour, the concert tour this month will be in major cities across Canada. Toronto, comma, Ontario, semicolon, because now we're in a whole new place. Winnipeg, comma, Manitoba, semicolon, because now we're going to a whole new place. Montreal, comma, Quebec, semicolon, and Regina, comma, Saskatchewan. And you would also use it if you were talking about a series of dates. I have several doctor's appointments in the next few months. Tuesday, comma, March 11th, semicolon. Wednesday, comma, March 26th, semicolon. Friday, comma, April 11th, semicolon. And Monday, April 28th. Okay, so this is cases where there's already a comma in the item you're trying to talk about. So then you need kind of a bigger comma to separate the items. Okay, does that make sense? Hopefully. Now, the next one, this is one of those ones that you will never have to use this if you don't want to, other than in this assignment, okay? But it can be a useful way to join two sentences that are related to each other by an important concept that you want to emphasize. Which for some reason, apparently I didn't think there needed to be a S in there. When you're doing this, each sentence must be capable of standing on its own. Otherwise, using a semicolon is just not appropriate. So each sentence must have its own subject, its own verb, and it must express a complete thought. Sometimes you may want to emphasize a connection, or maybe you're talking about kind of the same thing, so you're using a pronoun, you don't want to keep repeating the noun, but using a semicolon can kind of connect the sentences and make it more obvious what you're talking about. So here are a couple of examples. Good grades are integral to student success, semicolon. A strong support network is also important. Now, I didn't say important to student success, but it's implied because I've joined them with the semicolon, right? So it's kind of a way to keep that sentence from being too repetitive and still getting across the idea that both sentences are talking about student success. Number 2, winter always seems a sad and bleak season to me, semicolon. My daughter's death in December casts a shadow across it all. So in this case, the first sentence is talking about how they feel about a season. The second sentence isn't talking about winter at all, right? It's talking about their death and December. The semicolon is there to kind of get across the idea that those two are linked, that the reason why winter seems sad is because of the daughter's death. So that's the kind of thing where it's kind of a way of not having to necessarily spell every single thing out, but still getting across that there is a connection between these two sentences, right? Again, it's not something you have to use other than in this assignment. But it's good to know when you're reading why a writer might be using it, okay? Now, the other one is one I was really kind of unfamiliar with it, and I've definitely done this wrong, 100%. So my apologies. It's a very fine point, and I strongly suspect, because grammar does change, right? It's not fixed in stone. But this is one of those things that older people may be more familiar with, and generally be kind of falling out of favor, and in maybe another 10, 20 years, no one will kind of be aware of it because we'll sort of changed how we handle it. That's my opinion. But right now I'm showing it to you so you know how to use it, so that if you have a teacher who's a real stickler for details, you can use it correctly. So normally we only join two sentences together using a coordinating conjunction or the semicolon like we talked about. But sometimes we want to make a relationship between two sentences really clear, but there isn't an effective coordinating conjunction that expresses the right relationship or connection that we want to get across. And in these cases, we often use what's called a conjunctive adverb to start the second sentence. But we place a semicolon at the end of the first sentence to show it's ended. Now here's a joining adverb, and here's going to be our second sentence. And let me show you what I mean. I wanted to go to the dance very badly, semicolon. However, comma, my father had forbidden me from leaving the house. So I wanted to get across the idea, here's what I want, here's why I can't do it. However is my conjunctive adverb. I'm going to underline it just so you kind of see it. There's a semicolon in front of it. I'm using the adverb, and then I'm using a comma to set it off, okay? To show that it's kind of a little piece of introductory material. All right. Another example, the March fiscal year is almost over, semicolon. Therefore, comma, any new expenditures will not be purchased until April when the new budget begins. So therefore is my conjunctive adverb, right? And it's joining the first sentence that I'm showing that it ended using a semicolon. This is kind of beginning the new sentence, but it's a little piece of introductory information, right? If you'll recall, we usually have subjects at the beginning of a sentence. And when we do something different, like use an adverb there, we put a little comma afterwards, just kind of give your reader a heads up. Hey, this isn't the subject and I know it. This is something else, right? So a little bit obscure. And here are some of the conjunctive adverbs. So we talked about, oh, that's weird. Huh. I had totally changed this. I'm not sure why this is here. Hang on a second. Okay, I'm going to talk about this. Make sure that you use both the semicolon and the comma together when a conjunctive adverb separates the two main clauses. For example, I wanted to go, semicolon, however, comma, I was too busy. The check was for more than the balance, semicolon, consequently, comma, it bounced. These things really happened, semicolon. Otherwise, comma, I wouldn't have claimed to have seen them. So in these sentences, the conjunctive adverb, it kind of looks the way we use a coordinate conjunction like and, or, so, but it's not really considered as strong a joining word as a proper coordinate conjunction. So therefore, we use the semicolon to link the two main clauses, and then the comma is used to set off that adverb from its main clause. And I'm going to give you a little list of conjunctive adverbs here. So things like accordingly, furthermore, moreover, similarly, also, hence, namely, still, anyway, however, nevertheless, then, besides, incidentally, next, thereafter, certainly, indeed, nonetheless, therefore, consequently, instead, now, thus, finally, likewise, otherwise, undoubtedly, further, meanwhile. Now, I don't know about you, I hear those and I literally want to read them in like a British accent because they sound a little bit stuffy. They aren't necessarily how we talk in our normal everyday voice, but in writing, especially school writing, especially if you're planning to go on to college or university, these are really strong vocabulary words that will get across to your professor that you know what you are talking about. All right, so we are going to practice adding semicolons to sentences. So I'm going to read the sentence and you see where you think the semicolon should go. So number one, he had waited all his life for this moment. His triumph was finally here. So this one sounds to me like two sentences that have been joined together. He had waited all his life for this moment. That sounds like where the first one ends. So I'm going to put a semicolon there. And then I'm going to read the next one. His triumph. Yeah, that's definitely the subject of the next sentence. So I'm cool with that. We are touring in several cities, Detroit, Michigan, Chicago, Illinois, Charleston, South Carolina, and Cincinnati, Ohio. Okay, So here I've got city, state, city, state, city, state. So clearly I need to use my super comma here and separate them so it's obvious. So Detroit, Michigan is one place, it's not two separate places. Chicago, Illinois is a second place. I'm going to use a semicolon after it to show that. Charleston, South Carolina is a third place. I'm going to use another semicolon. And then Cincinnati, Ohio. I wouldn't use one at the end. You could never end a sentence with a semicolon. It's not appropriate there, okay? Number 3, being an Olympian requires total dedication. Every moment is scheduled and planned in order to get the most out of every day. Now, this is a funny sentence, because I almost want to read it. Being an Olympian requires total dedication every moment. But if I do that, the next sentence starts with is, which doesn't make any sense. Being an Olympian requires total dedication. That could be the end of a sentence. I'm going to try it and put it there, put a semicolon there. And then every moment becomes the subject of the next sentence. Every moment is scheduled and planned. Yeah. Okay. She looked at her calendar to see what was available. Monday, September 18th, Tuesday, October 17th, Monday, October 30th, and Tuesday, November 14th were all that were left. Now, obviously, when you're talking about a date, Monday and September are not necessarily different things. In this case, it's the Monday that is in September that is the number 18th. So we want to use the super comma usage of putting the semicolon right after the 18th. Oh, that's funny. Haha. It automatically turned my big TH into a small one to get across the idea that it's a date. It's kind of cute. All right, Tuesday, October 17th. I'm going to add a TH there just so it can do it again. I'm going to take away the comma and put a semicolon. Nice. Monday, October 30th. Take away the comma, put a semicolon instead. And I don't need it for the next one, okay? And then the last sentence, the sales reports were sent to me 2 weeks late. Consequently, this analysis was delayed as well. So this is 2 sentences. They've been joined by the word consequently, but remember, consequently is not one of the coordinating conjunctions. So it's not strong enough to do it by itself. So we're going to use a semicolon, because a semicolon all by itself can separate or join, I guess, 2 main sentences. But consequently is also kind of giving us a description of what's going on, right? It's a conjunctive adverb. Consequently, this analysis was delayed as well. All right, next thing. So then your actual assignment is going to be that you have to create some sentences using semicolons. Now, if you've never really used semicolons in your work before, this might be a little challenging, which I totally get, because I have to say, I don't feel like I've used semicolons a whole lot other than when I'm talking about dates or locations, right? It's not something I use a lot. I don't think it's taught that much anymore. I don't remember being taught a whole lot about it myself when I was in school, and I'm pretty old. So if you were younger, one of my younger students probably didn't get taught, because I find grammar has not been taught very much the last 15, 20 years. Not to sound like an old fogey, but here we go. Okay, so as a super comma for dates. So my advice would be, because you can create however you want, but if you're not sure how to do it, the 2 ways I would do would be to look at some of the ways that we use semicolons, like using it for dates, using it for locations, using it to join 2 sentences with a connected idea, using it to join 2 sentences using a conjunctive adverb. The other way you could do it is you could look at, say, the conjunctive adverbs and get some ideas for that. You don't necessarily have to use each type. I just think it's a good idea to practice them, okay? So as a super comma for dates, so I'm going to want a string of dates in order to use the semicolon appropriately here. So let me see. Somehow with dates, I either think about like doctors or concerts or birthdays. I'll do birthdays. So just fair warning, I don't have these many kids, but just in case my kid, oh, hang on a second. I gotta make it longer, so it lets me write here. Hang on. Okay. My capital M. My kids' birthdays are March. So hang on. I'm gonna use dates just because. Wednesday, March 18th. Thursday, April 22nd. And Friday, May 26th. Okay. So hang on. I'm going to kind of pull some things out of the way here so that we don't get them mixed up. Okay. So I used commas, but remember the comma doesn't make sense there. I have to use the semicolon. So my first date is the Wednesday, March 18th. Then I put a semicolon. Don't forget your space. Thursday, April 22nd is my second date. I'm going to put a semicolon after that one. And then I don't need one for the third one because that's the end of the sentence. And then I could join two sentences with a connected idea. Okay. So let me think. What are two things I might want to talk about? I usually think of these as conceptual ones, like you're doing two things together or talking about something sort of connected. Let me think here. Christmas is my favorite season, semicolon. And then what else can I talk about Christmas? I don't want to use the word Christmas again because I feel like that's repetitive. And the whole point of the semicolon is to kind of get away from that kind of repetitiveness. I love picking out wonderful gifts for my friends and family. Now, I would want to quickly check. Do these both count as complete sentences? Christmas is my favorite season. Yep. Christmas is my subject. There's my verb. Second one, yep, there's my subject. Love picking out. There's my verb. I'm good. It's totally valid to have it work as a joined thing. All right, to join two sentences using a conjunctive adverb. Ooh, this one is one where I'm going to take a quick look back at the conjunctive adverbs and see which one kind of strikes me. Let me think here. I love words like nevertheless or undoubtedly or furthermore. Furthermore is calling my name and wants me to use it. All right. Do the words call your name too? Is that just me? Okay, let me think here. I am very upset that you forgot our anniversary. I'm going to use that as the end of my sentence and put a semicolon there. And then I'm going to use my conjunctive adverb. Furthermore, comma, you also forgot my birthday this year. Now, in real world, we probably wouldn't talk like this, but you might use it in papers where you were trying to connect two things like this experiment happened and then furthermore, we had another experiment happen. I'm not going to use the super comma for locations. It's the same idea as using a super comma for dates, okay? So moving on. I don't know if we're going to get there. Do you really have to use a semicolon? Well, you kind of do for this exercise. I know some writers hate them and some students do too. Some people are very vocal about never using them in their writing because they feel like they're kind of pretentious and overdone. They were more used in the past because authors tended to create much longer sentences. When I was like looking around at examples and the things, I found one where there was an entire paragraph that I would have broken up into probably 20 sentences. And the author had created like one gigantic sentence using multiple semicolons. It was crazy. It's just not how we write anymore. It's just like grammar changes over the years. So does how we write. currently, I don't know if it's because of devices or whatever, but we tend to write much shorter sentences that are easier to understand. And because of that, semicolons are just not as necessary. Now, having said that, here is an example of somebody who does like semicolons and is using it. And I put this in there just so you can see the kind of writing that might use semicolons, okay? So this is from Claire Massoud, and I'm going to talk, read it in her voice. In compiling the sentence, efficiency, or more precisely, precision, is important, semicolon. Capacity is important, semicolon, and clarity is important. This kind of writer, at least, doesn't think in little stoppered declarative sentences. It isn't like that. Not really ever. Perhaps for some people, but not for us. For those of us whose thoughts digress, semicolon, for whom unexpected juxtapositions are exhilarating rather than tiresome, semicolon, who aim, if always inadequately, to convey life's experience in some semblance of its complexity. For such writers, the semicolon is invaluable. So you can see that's not necessarily how we write anymore. It's beautiful writing, but it's not necessarily how we write these days, which is why maybe we don't use it as often. Now, I wanted to talk a little tiny bit about colons. You don't need to use colons in this assignment at all, but I kind of felt like I should cover them just as well because with the name being so similar, I kind of felt like there might be some confusion between the two types of punctuation. In addition, sometimes when people have handed stuff into me, they've mixed it up and used all colons, and so I kind of am wanting to cover it. But I'm covering it just so you know, don't use colons in this assignment, but I do want you to be aware of how to use colons, right? Why do we use colons in their writing? There are multiple reasons. To give emphasis, to present dialogue, to introduce lists or tabbed texts, and to clarify composition or book titles. So emphasis is where like you say the whole sentence and then here is your word or phrase that they want you to pay attention to. So he had only one goal, colon, the destruction of his enemies, right? They're trying to set it off and make it stand out. It was her favorite holiday, colon, Christmas. The sound had haunted him throughout his dreams, colon, the memory of her screams, right? So it works really well for that kind of thing. The next way is more, less exciting and more utilitarian. That is when we're using dialogue, not when we're writing stories, but in plays or sometimes in interviews, or if you see like a podcast transcription where they want to make it clear who's talking, what they usually do is they put the person's name, then they put a colon, and then they write what they say. So piggy number 1, colon, no, you can't come in. Big bad wolf, colon, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow the house down. So instead of saying piggy number 1 said, and if you were like an actor reading this, you would ignore the part that says piggy number 1, but you would know, oh, hey, I'm piggy number 1. This is my chance to come in and talk, right? Another example is where you see like a question and answer interview with Chris Hadfield. And here they just put question as a Q and they put a colon and then they say what the question is. And then they put a capital A and then a colon and then they give his answer. So you won't necessarily see that used all the time. But like, I don't know, I haven't read Rolling Stone magazine for a long time, but when I did, this is the kind of thing that you might see in, say, a Rolling Stone magazine, where the writer doesn't want to make a lot of commentary. They just want to give you the exact words that that person said, which I actually love that style. But if you didn't know what it meant, it might be confusing. The other thing is where you're going to introduce lists or text or tabular material. When you do that, you would capitalize the very first word after the colon, but only if it is a proper noun or the start of a whole complete sentence. So here's an example as a list. Here is what you need to bring to summer camp, colon, and then the list starts. Sunglasses, sunscreen, 5 pairs of shorts or pants, 5 t-shirts, 5 pairs of socks, 5 pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of shoes, 1 that can get wet, period. Okay, so it's letting you know, hey, there's a list coming up. And then also when you are setting off a topic material, I don't know if you're going to, I'm trying to think if you would use that for this course at all. You wouldn't use it necessarily for this course, but you would definitely use this if you are going on to college, okay? Because there are times when you might use a bigger quote from someone else's work. And this is what you normally do. You would use a colon at the end and then like a little indent, and then you'd put the material there. And that way people know, hey, this isn't my words. This is this other person word. So here's an example of how that might look in a piece of text. Martin Luther King's most famous speech is known for this section, colon. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. And then it goes on, right? And instead of using quotation marks, when it's a longer speech, I think it's more than 3 lines, we don't normally keep on using quotation marks. We changed this kind of indented format, okay? And then the last way you would use colons is if you're using like books or sometimes songs or movies where there's like a big title and then like a smaller subtitle, right? And on a book, they don't use it because you can see it visually. They've made the word computer really big. And then the subtitle underneath says a history of the information machine. But if you were writing that out as a sentence, you're not going to physically make the word computer bigger when you're writing, right? It's not a visual format. So we would show that using the colon. We would say computer, colon, a history of the information machine. There's a few other places where we use colons like time and when you're doing bibliographies, but we're not going to get into that today. So colons are used a little bit differently than semicolons. So don't use the colon for this assignment. You are only using the semicolon. Gosh. Well, we're going to start looking at activity number 5. If we don't quite get all the way finished, we'll work on this tomorrow. But anyways, this is still activity number 5, but it's assignment number 16. So here we're talking about writing a paragraph consisting of at least 6 sentences on a topic of your choice. Include at least 2 semicolons. As well, try to use some adjectives or adverbs and participles to make your writing more interesting. Now, that is what they have written, and that is what we did last year. You can do that. I'm also creating kind of an alternate assignment for people who maybe want to do something a little bit different. This is write a Facebook post responding to any news event in your community or surrounding area, such as Sioux Lookout, Dryden, or Kenora. It could be about anything newsworthy, a fire, an accident, a death, a birth, a marriage, a new school, a special event or activity, or a social justice issue. It should still be 6 sentences long, and it still only needs 2 semicolons. And the reason for that is if you try to use more than 2 semicolons if you tried to use one for every sentence, it would really look and sound quite strange. So you don't want to do that, okay? And here is a Facebook post template. You don't have to use this. It's not in your unit. This is kind of a new version I'm thinking of for this year. If you haven't got it, which you probably won't, phone me or email me and I would be happy to send you a copy back. Or you can literally just draw a square on your page and write Facebook on it. It does not matter. I'm just trying to get across the idea of it. Either type of assignment that you do, whether it's just an ordinary paragraph or the Facebook post, they're both going to be worth 10 marks. So there's no benefit to one or the other. I just think the Facebook post is a little more interesting and gives you practice doing this in media. So I mark this according to a rubric, and I'm going to show you the rubric in a minute, and it applies to either one. Okay, so here is the marking rubric. And it's basically the same thing we've been using for the journal, because journals and this, they're not significantly different, right? So I'm looking at, did you understand the question in the paragraph format? Do you select good details and examples to explain the concepts and opinions? What are your communication skills like? And that way we're looking at, is what you mean clear? Do you use good organization? What about sentence fluency, tone, transitions? And then using conventions, spelling, grammar, capitalization, punctuation, and then length. I've had to put length in here because I occasionally have people who would hand me in an assignment with like 2 lines, and there's no real way for me to mark that. So that's why that is there. Okay. So if you're choosing between the two, how is the format of a Facebook post different from a traditional paragraph? Well, I find a lot of times Facebook posts are expressing an opinion about something. Not always, they don't have to, but I think it's very common. Usually their audience knows about the topic or event. Sometimes they might be trying to inform others about this event or topic, like, hey, did you hear about blah, blah, blah? Generally, if you're writing a Facebook post, it is always in the first person, okay? I think that, I believe that, I saw that. It might use emojis. And in Facebook posts, we might use incomplete sentences. However, for the purposes of this assignment, please do not do that because we're practicing using complete sentences. But that's how they are different, okay? So most of the information in the following slides really can apply either to doing a traditional paragraph or to doing a Facebook post. I'm going to suggest that if you do the Facebook post, treat it as an opinion paragraph because it gives you a chance to practice it, okay? We are going to do it later on. It's a great chance to practice. I also think just sometimes having a more specific topic makes it easier to write. Sometimes when it's just like, here, write about anything, people kind of go blank and are like, I don't know what to write about. And they sort of panic a little bit. So that's my idea, but you can do what you like. Here, we've done this before. This is your basic paragraph format and it works for opinions as well. First thing is you would state what is your opinion on the topic. Then you would give me 4 to 6 sentences that state the reasons for your opinion, and you'd provide some examples to prove your point. And then the very last sentence would restate your opinion on the topic, hopefully in a new and interesting way, okay? So, quick understanding check before we go on. Which one of these statements correctly describes a paragraph format? A, any group of sentences based on a single topic. B, an opening sentence followed by 3 to 5 detail sentences that explain your ideas. C, an opening sentence that is supported by at least 3 to 5 sentences wrapped up by a concluding sentence that restates the main topic sentence. Or D, a half page of text regardless of how many sentences it has. So hopefully you see C is a paragraph. And I'm saying this because every year I have people that just figure, well, as long as they're grouped together, they count as a paragraph, but that just isn't true, okay? Now, even for a little short assignment like this, I do want you to get into the habit of using the writing process, okay? Each step can take like 5 minutes. It does not have to take a long period of time, right? But getting into the habit of thinking in this very structured way will make it much easier when we get to the longer assignments, which we're coming up on, right? The very last assignment in this unit is writing a short story, and it's kind of a long one. So if you've got practice doing this sort of planning, it's going to be much easier. So as always, we do step 1 is planning, step 2 is a rough draft, step 3 is revising, step 4 is editing, and step 5 is publishing, which in our world is just meaning that you hand it in to me at that point. Okay, so use that paragraph structure to help you organize your brainstorming or planning. Sometimes we just kind of write down random ideas. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do first. But when you write things down, thinking about the structure of how you plan to write them, it can really make it so much easier to write your rough draft. So your very first step is picking a topic that you've got a strong opinion on. So think about what is a good topic for you. What do you have strong opinions about? Maybe you care about politics or special events or civil rights, or maybe you just want to talk about some fun things. It doesn't really matter. So the very first thing is talk about your opinion, okay? Then give your reasons, okay? In the real world, we sometimes give an opinion without backing it up. Like we might say, I think Fifth Avenue is the best place to eat in town, right? And that's totally fine. But in a paragraph format, I then need to give 3 or 4 reasons why I think Fifth Ave is the best place to eat in town. Number 1, the service is always fast. Number 2, I love the food, right? I have to keep on thinking of reasons and giving examples, right? And then at the very end, I look at my opinion and I try to say it in a new way, okay? It's just kind of like, just like when you walk into the room, you say goodbye and then you talk. Sorry, when you walk into the room, you say hello and then you talk and then you say goodbye. It's the same thing, right? You wouldn't just walk out of the room with no warning. It's the same kind of thing. The closing sentence is kind of wrapping up all your ideas and giving your reader sort of a heads up that you are about to leave. All right, because we're a little bit short on time, I'm not going to do the brainstorming I thought we might do. So what I would do is I would have 2 pages. I would have my brainstorming notes, my 1 page over here on my left, and then over here on my right, I would have my rough draft. And I would just go from one to the other. Here's my topic sentence idea. I would write a good opening sentence. Here's my first detail. I would try and write a sentence or 2 on my first detail. Here's my second argument. I would try and write a few more sentences. And I would just go from one to the other, one to the other, one to the other. Okay. Once you got your rough draft down, then you want to work on stage 3, which is the revisions. Now, a lot of people get the revisions stage and the editing stage mixed up. So I kind of want to clarify the difference. So revising, when you do revising, you are looking at major changes to the content, the length, the style, or your organization. When you're editing, you're not doing any kind of changes to content, length, style, organization, okay? Because for editing, your focus is on correcting convention errors. That's really all you're doing for editing. You're looking at your punctuation, you're looking at your capitalization, you're looking at your grammar, you're looking at your spelling. So a lot of people are skipping right over revising and they're just doing editing. But editing is kind of a last minute tidy up, right? It's as if you cleaned the whole room and now you're just kind of sweeping up, making the last little bit look tidy. But the big stuff, like the furniture rearranging and painting the walls and all that good stuff, that's your revision stage, okay? So that's kind of important. That's where you look at, is the organization of my sentences, does it make sense? Does it follow the format? Clarity. Does what I'm saying, is it understandable? Have I backed up my ideas? If somebody else read this, would they understand what I'm talking about? Style. That's kind of talking about like, how well are you writing, right? How can you make changes? How could you improve your writing? Vocabulary. Have you used appropriate words for academic writing? Are you repeating words over and over again? Length. Does the length meet the assignment? This is not so hard here where we're only doing 6 sentences, but later on when you're doing assignments that might be a page or 2, it can be really important to go back and take a look and say, hey, did I make this long enough? Do I need to add a whole bunch more stuff? And then looking at details and examples. Did you give enough details and examples? So please don't skip this step. It's really important. And I do very specifically if you hand in a rough copy and a good copy, I do look to make sure that you've done important revisions. So these are the steps that I would take if I was going to revise, okay? I would check first that I followed the correct writing format. Did I write in the opinion or the narrative, the descriptive, whatever the assignment asked for? I would fix any issues with that first. Number 2, I would read my work out loud. Does it make sense? Is there any important information missing that's making the work or the words confusing or unclear? Things like missing steps, information that's out of order, missing names, unclear pronouns, a lack of examples or details. This is probably the most important thing. This is where you can make the most improvements, I find. Length, we already talked about that. Vocabulary, also we already talked about that. Finally, look at your overall writing style. Are there places where you could increase the variety of your sentence types or the sentence formats or their length? Have you used transition or sequencing words to help the reader make connections better? And how is the tone of the piece? Does it match your purpose and your audience? Okay, just a quick thing. I think we've talked about this before, but if we haven't, we will definitely come back to this over and over again. Transition words. We use transition words to help connect different sentences. There's chronological or sequencing ones first, after that, finally. There's adversarial ones that try to show contrast. Conversely, on the other hand, either way. And there's additive, where we're trying to show, hey, there's one more thing, in addition, as well, furthermore, those kind of things. And then finally, then you would do the editing, capitalization, usage and grammar errors, punctuation, and spelling errors. I have a whole bunch of slides on this, but we don't have time. We've got to wrap up. Tomorrow is our last class for the week. Give me a phone call if you need help with anything, or send me an email. I'd be happy to talk to you and get things worked out. And I hope you have a good evening.